Well, is Justin Trudeau about to be swallowed up by the giant conservative right-wing extremist wave that just rolled through Europe? Is Trudeau next? Is he out of a job? Well, the polls seem to suggest that. But yesterday, Trudeau spoke about this right-wing extremism, the right-wing wave. And how does he normally handle these types of interactions with people that raise concerns about the government, say like the trucker convoy? Well, Trudeau had a response. Listen.
We have seen around the world a rise of populist right-wing forces in just about every democracy that we've seen. And it is of concern to see political parties choosing to instrumentalize anger, fear, division, anxiety. My approach has always been to respond to it, to understand it, and to look to solve it.
So Trudeau likes to get together with these individuals and have a conversation with these individuals? Okay, we'll talk about that. Plus, one of the major stories coming out of Canada that really no one's talking about, but it keeps coming up during the question period in Parliament. Why won't you unmask the individuals who are basically spying on Canada with inside the government? Why can't we learn their names? Who are these individuals? We're going to get to the bottom of that story and more. David Creighton joins us from Ottawa, Canada. He's an independent journalist who writes at the Post Millennial, and he's working on this new story right now as we speak. David, great to see you.
Nice to be back, Clayton.
So let's take first we'll get to the spying piece in a second, which is utterly fascinating, but let's talk about what Trudeau just had to say about the right-wing wave that's just swept across, Spain, Poland, Germany, Austria. The list is fairly endless at this point. Is he next? Is he concerned about it?
He's always concerned about it. It's funny, when I first saw this news conference and this comment, I saw it out of context and I said, oh, there he goes again. Because Trudeau says this all the time, not just in the wake of EU elections. He says this all the time, that he's always out there fighting against these right-wing populist forces. And he's not the one creating division. It's these right-wing populist forces that are creating division. He said it again. And of course, all you have to do is look at this man's record and who's the one who's creating division and who's the one who's down in the polls so far. He hasn't got a hope or a prayer of winning another election. It's Justin Trudeau. He reacts to a trucker convoy protest. He reacts to free speech and freedom of assembly by calling out the police and having people incarcerated or having heads crushed by police forces. How does he respond to parents who say, I don't want my children to be there for the raising of the pride flag, or I don't want my children to be indoctrinated into gender ideology? He says the parents are domestic terrorists. He says the parents are the problem. So this is the guy who's constantly creating division in our society. He's putting Canadian against Canadian. He wants Muslims to be against Christians, to be against Jews. He wants everybody fighting, so he comes out on top. But what's happening actually is what Justin Trudeau fears the most is that his political opponents are all uniting because they have much more in common than they ever thought. And one of those things they have in common is a real detestation of Justin Trudeau's policies, especially when it comes to religion and the family and traditional values. So yes, Justin Trudeau's very concerned because what's happening in Europe is that these so-called far-right parties are coming together. And what makes them far right, I ask you, Clayton? They're anti-war in Ukraine. I thought far-right parties were supposed to be militaristic and in favor of war. But these are parties in Europe that are saying, end the war in Ukraine, stop spending billions, stop killing Ukrainians, stop killing Russians, let's end the war, and let's stop mass immigration because it's changing Europe beyond any recognition. That doesn't make people far right. That makes them commonsensical. It does make them populist, but populism is democracy. And this is what Justin Trudeau never understands. Populism is not a force contrary to democracy. Populism is democracy. And Justin Trudeau fears democracy. He really, really does. He's an elitist. He's a globalist. He's certainly not anybody who can understand populism or even democracy. He'll never get democracy.
Right, the people's voice. And also, there was a big green backlash throughout Europe as well. One of the big undercurrents of what happened just in Europe is the green parties got crushed. So all of this sort of climate alarmism, climate change policies, and let's shut down our nuclear power plants, let's shut down our coal plants, let's shut down all of this. So now we're paying twice for electricity, we're paying twice for our energy. There was a huge backlash against that. I can imagine the same thing would also be happening in Canada as well. You've seen a lot of Trudeau's green policies kind of go up in smoke, and they're continuing to drive a wedge in Canadian politics.
Well, Trudeau was the keynote speaker, as he is every year, at this annual convention of Canadian mayors and reeves. So it's quite influential. These are people from across Canada. They come out every year. This year they're in Montreal. Trudeau was the keynote speaker, and he took some questions from the crowd. And they were hostile questions. People saying, we don't believe you want to ever balance the budget. You don't even think it's possible. But the questions about climate change were really interesting. People were just fed up. Mayors across the country were fed up with hearing about how the carbon tax is going to save the world from climate change. And when he repeated his talking points that he does every day he's in question period, but 8 out of 10 Canadians get more back from the carbon rebate, he was ridiculed, heckled. People were laughing at him. And these are people that he's usually a friendly audience because he goes there every year expecting lots of applause and affirmation. He got neither this year. And of course, he looked so uncomfortable. He's making these grimaces. He's giving the thumbs up and the crowd is booing. So it's not a good look for Trudeau. And clearly people are fed up with being told that you can't drive your car, you can't heat your home. And by the way, if you lose your job on the oil rig, which a lot of people in Alberta are going to be losing their jobs on the oil rigs if he strangles fossil fuel in this country, there's always a job as a janitor. And it's funny, an internal memo from the Trudeau government indicated exactly that about 6 months ago. All of these people are going to lose their high-paying jobs in the oil rigs. Well, there's always a janitorial position for them, or perhaps they can make some solar panels. But oops, we forgot. China already has a monopoly on that, so there's really no other recourse.
It's unbelievable. Another story is about this spying scandal. The United States right now has a bit of a scandal on its hands. The revelation that almost every member of Congress has basically an Israeli lobby babysitter, according to Congressman Thomas Massie, sort of an APEC babysitter as part of the lobbying that they have to go through. Thomas Massie and a handful of other members of Congress do not. So sort of foreign influence, really, in the United States, but Canada dealing with something perhaps even far worse. According to this new federal government report, which just came out, and it was a nonpartisan report that you've been writing about, it describes how these elected officials in Canada are wittingly, not unwittingly, but wittingly controlled by foreign states, and then are expected to engage in espionage, spying, on behalf of these host nations, these foreign nations, favors from these host nations. I mean, this sounds like an absolute bombshell. Do we know what these host nations are? Do we know the names of these politicians yet? I mean, this sounds to me the biggest story in all of Canada right now.
It is certainly in question period. It's what everybody's leading off with. And there has been some media coverage of it. Interestingly enough, the chairman of this intelligence group is a Liberal member of Parliament from Ottawa South. So this certainly is a non-partisan or a multi-partisan intelligence group. Now, what happened is that they put this report together and they gave Trudeau the unredacted copy. So Trudeau knows this is about 11 weeks ago. He got the copy. He knows who these members of Parliament are who are spying. And I'm not going to put it in any looser, lighter terms. They're spying for foreign powers. And who are these foreign powers? Well, the report says it's largely China, but they've also named India, Pakistan, and Russia. But they say it's overwhelmingly China because China is also, of course, the motor of this election interference that's been going on at the same time. The report makes it quite clear. Doesn't name any names obviously in the redacted report, but it does suggest there are possibly, from subsequent reports we've had, up to 11 or 12 members of parliament who are in the pockets of a foreign government, probably China. Now, I would argue that these are government MPs, because if you're a foreign power looking for somebody with influence, you're probably going to tap into the government side, possibly even cabinet ministers. And this, of course, is a concern. Do we have treasonous people in the House of Commons, potentially in the cabinet of the federal government? We need to know these names. And the Trudeau government keeps saying, we can't tell you, we can't tell you. It would be a violation of the National Securities Act. We can't say, if we did so, we'd be arrested. And the legal opinion on that is divided, because there are those who say if it's in the public interest to know, and certainly this is in the public interest to know, that it's not going to be a violation of the National Securities Act, and the public has a right to know who these people are who are taking favors, accepting favors from foreign governments, and obviously doing something in return. And this is a real concern.
Do we know what they're doing in return yet? Have we gotten any instances of this? Has any of this leaked out?
There's been nothing in terms of what the favors have been. Was it in the unredacted version of the report? Probably. I've read the redacted version. It's very comprehensive, except it's heavily censored. I mean, there are huge portions are just gone, saying that this portion was redacted in accordance with the National Security Act, so you can't see it. But what comes to mind here, Clinton, is that what this dovetails perfectly into the election interference controversy in this country about China helping to elect largely liberal MPs in return for these MPs doing something for them. And it also dovetails into the story about our biolab, our top secret biolab in Winnipeg, where two Chinese scientists were working for 2 years, and they were conducting espionage on behalf of the Chinese secret police. Why did they stay for 2 years? Or is our security that bad in this country that they didn't know what to do about it? Was there a quid pro quo for these Chinese scientists? Was that quid pro quo help in the general election that Trudeau won following the dismissal of these two Chinese scientists? This is raising huge questions about the credibility of the Trudeau government, about the sovereignty of Canada, and about the ability of the Trudeau government to conduct itself in a reasonable and democratic fashion without being beholden to foreign interests. This is a basic question for any democracy. Is it in the pocket of foreign interests? And when you have a report saying, yeah, we've got a bunch of MPs doing this, the uproar is increasing. And I think you'll see a cacophony of voices saying we need to know who these people are, because it is foundational to what Canada is as a democracy. I don't think there would be any question if this same thing happened in the House of Representatives in the United States. If there were potentially a dozen congressmen or congresswomen working for China, would there be obfuscation from the government, even from the speaker? I think there would be incredible public uproar and demand for answers. So I hope we see more of that here.
Yeah, I agree. All right, David Clayton, great to see you as always. We'll keep our eye on this story. This is developing in Canada, and we'll see how much of the mainstreaming corporate media actually covered this story. David, as always, great to have you here. Thanks so much.
Always nice to be. Thank you.